Welcome to Democratic Television, the Democratic voice in the East Tennessee region, Knoxville area. I am Nancy Stewart, and I will be your host as we discuss proposed cuts in the federal budget, especially those that apply to the arts. Knoxville is a town that seems just loaded with activities that are artistic, from street fairs to formal classical performances, from sidewalk painting to major art exhibits, everything in between. Some of these things are funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. There's also the National Endowment for the Humanities. These are proposed to be cut. And so we want to see what is the impact on our community of these cuts if they happen. And I'm going to be an optimist and say if. Because these agencies support our local arts scene, and we want to find out how and why. And we have a very distinguished panel today to discuss these matters. We have David Butler from the Knoxville Museum of Art, Brian Salesky from the Knoxville Opera Company, and Liza Zenni from the Arts and Cultural Alliance. That's alphabetical. And we want to start off by saying, what does your organization provide to this community, and why is it important? Can you say that in just a few words? Lisa, why don't we start with you?
Thank you, Nancy. The Arts and Cultural Alliance is a membership-driven organization, including, as our members, the Knoxville Opera and the Knoxville Museum of Art. Together, this industry has 4,600 individual activities, events, performances for students, for families, and for visitors to Greater Knoxville. And that generates over $145 million worth of economic impact to Greater Knoxville.
And Lisa, you bring up a point, and you brought it up too, Nancy, that the scale of what happens locally in the arts is huge. It's an industry.
It is.
It isn't this little thing over the side. It's a big industry. It generates a lot of dollars. It takes a lot of dollars. Raises a lot of money locally that stays here, but there's that piece from the NEA that is kind of like a nice, solid foundation that is often invisible, but it's there.
That's correct. It helps us as an industry. Knoxville's arts and culture is the sixth largest employer in Greater Knoxville. And so the support that the NEA provides is very low-key and invisible, but it is essential because of what it does. And
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead, but
Yeah.
that's all right.
That's all right. Well, I was going to turn to you and ask what part of your budget is funded by this. Well, you first tell us what you do, and then what part of your budget.
the best way to think about the Knoxville Museum of Art is as a repository, not the repository, but maybe the most important repository of the visual culture of East Tennessee, whether historic or current. And we provide access to all kinds of high quality art experiences, whether looking at art or making art, for free. Mm-hmm. Almost everything we do is free, and the doors are open. You just come in and enjoy it. And I'd like to think that we're a place where people kind of discover who they are as a community in different ways. Mm-hmm. And to answer your question, we get about $20,000 a year indirectly through the Tennessee Arts Commission from the National Endowment for the Arts. It's kind of buried and invisible, but if we lost that, will we go out of business? No, but we'd have to find that somewhere else. In fact, this year we got another $10,000 for an exhibition of work by Jared Sprecher, a Knoxville artist who teaches at UT, fantastic artist. So our share of NEA funds this year was $30,000. That's a lot to make up.
Oh, yes.
And again, it wouldn't put us out of business, but we'd have to come from somewhere.
It's a project.
And every dollar that the KMA gets has to be matched with a private dollar. So really, that is an important value proposition. People say, oh, if I give $1, then actually the KMA will appreciate $2.
And it's matched almost 100 times over. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
But it's an ongoing, stable, always there set amount, and that if the president's budget is approved, which I don't think will happen, but if that happens, that goes away.
Mm-hmm. And the beauty of the National Endowment for the Arts on a political level is that it has always been supported bipartisanly. Republicans and Democrats and independents
Good point.
all support the National Endowment for the Arts.
Yes, this is a Democratic-sponsored program, but we all know that the arts are not political in that sense.
And our organizations
not partisan,
do not
they may be
represent any
political.
party.
Right.
Well, you know, one would hope, Nancy, that politics, pure politicking, doesn't enter into the evaluation of whether or not a healthy arts community is worth having. I think we are very blessed in the state of Tennessee to have a legislature with an arts caucus, which is our kind of watchdog group, if you will, when it comes to the program of the license plates. And I think many of the listeners today are probably not aware of how the Tennessee Arts Commission is funded. Yes, there's the NEA component, which is important to everybody, because as David said, it's buried in a number, but we know the number. We know the NEA is part of our Tennessee Arts Commission granting system.
Well, and to back up for a second, a lot of people don't know that I think about half of NEA's appropriation through Congress is designated to be distributed probably on a proportional basis to all 50 states. So there's a chunk of money that goes a block of money that goes out to each state, and then in each state, those funds are redistributed by the state arts organization.
And in Tennessee, that represents $800,000.
That comes back to Tennessee.
That comes
through
back
the
to
NEA.
Tennessee, and that, with those matching dollars, that's $1.6 million of support that, for the most part, goes to people who cannot pay for it. Brian's education program is supported by the National Endowment. That's children, up to 30,000 children that just the opera reaches every year.
Yeah, I wanted to have both of you particularly talk about your community outreach programs. I'm more familiar with the opera program because of personal involvement, but would you, for our listeners, watchers, tell us about
last year we did 97 individual outreach events, education outreach events. Now that is an A to Z buffet of major concerts like Knoxville Opera Goes to Church, down to an Opera 101 in a school, African American Voices series in schools. We're in county, out of county, and so it's a program that attempts, and successfully so, I think, reaches not only the tens of thousands of people, but also where are we reaching the people is important as well. We're not just going down the block. We are truly traveling around and reaching out and touching a lot of people in rural areas, etc. So it's a robust program, and especially an amazing one, I think, because we have only a staff of 4, and I do 99% of them myself. So it's quite amazing in a town of our size to have an opera company that's doing that much for the community's benefit, alongside a robust program at the Art Museum, an incredible program from the KSO, the Knoxville Symphony, an amazing amount of education and outreach that all of us are doing constantly. And so
Brian makes a really good point that so much of what we do is out there in the community. People, you talk about the arts, and people have this idea of this la-di-da thing, and drinking a cup
Champagne.
of tea with your pinky up. In fact, it's mostly down and dirty and out where people live. We reach about 13,000 kids each year outside of the museum, at least that many, if not more, inside. And we focus those programs on the least well-served parts of this community, some of the poorest and most economically disadvantaged.
Really?
Well, most areas of Knox County are rural.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, these guys, they go out into Rutledge, they go into Roane County, they go into Loudoun County. These children and these families,
As does the symphony and
That's right.
other
Yes.
organizations.
they would
yeah.
have no access to this wonderful world of the arts without their efforts to take the arts to them.
And the NEA, as well as the Tennessee Arts Commission, are very focused on access. and making experiences accessible to everybody, whether they can pay for them or not. I guarantee you there are programs in every one of Tennessee's, is it 100 counties?
95.
95, sorry. There's some pretty isolated, low populated areas out there, but I guarantee you there are programs there that are indirectly sponsored by the NEA. They understand the importance of that kind of coverage in big fancy places and in small poor places.
Yeah. A good example for us is yesterday I did an Opera 101 at a Boys and Girls Club locally. Next year we're going to be bringing our in-school performance of Puccini's Turandot to Harrogate, which is way up there, and we're going to do Opera 101 in La Follette. So we all strive to do what the mandate is, and the NEA is very clear about their mandate, and tangentially the Tennessee Arts Commission as well. And that's what we strive to do, is to serve everyone.
And that funding source, even though it's a pretty small percentage of our total funding picture, because that's a priority of the NEA and TAC, it becomes our priority too.
Right.
Yes.
Those funding agencies are good at pushing a particular agenda. And
Yeah, it's much easier to stay in your home base than to
Oh, yeah,
go
much
off
easier,
to
of course.
some of these outlying places,
course.
I'm
But
sure.
that's their mission. You know,
Absolutely.
these nonprofit arts organizations are obligated by law to deliver educational activities to people who would otherwise have no access. They're obligated by law to do that, and they do it beautifully.
And that federal agency as a driver of agendas is an example of how for a relatively small amount of money you get big results, big impact. They can really make things happen, and they really punch above their weight in terms of the dollars they have to distribute. But if you want those dollars, you've got to hit certain marks as an organization, and they've done a really good job of pushing programs for people with disabilities, for people who are underserved, for rural areas, for all kind of audiences that ordinarily would get left out.
Yeah.
The biggest recipient of NEA funds in the city of Knoxville is the Jubilee Community Arts, and they are funded consistently to communicate and to pass on the traditional arts of this area. You know, it is not a highfalutin thing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in all of this discussion, it's interesting that you're citing the benefits and the economic impact and so forth. Seems to me that a lot of these outreach programs have profound influences on the development, particularly of children. And
Absolutely.
you know, we haven't even mentioned that whole side of it, which is a huge reason, I think, to reach out as far and wide as possible.
Well, children who are exposed to music year after year, generation after generation, since they've been testing kids for college entry, have been, you know, a child that has been exposed to the arts has scored 49 points higher on the English and on the verbal, rather, and math portions of the SAT. It's proof without really, with no skewing of it. And it's we have the Moreland Heights Elementary School, who employed arts integration a few years ago. They tested their students before, they tested their students after, and this is not, that's kind of a rural part of Knox County. And those students that had been exposed to arts integration had a 400% increase in their creativity ratings. And that is what our chamber is telling us that we need.
Yeah.
We need people who are coming up and becoming of employable age who are creative.
And even beyond that, just in terms of being a fully developed human being, you need to be exposed to certain things.
Yeah.
When you're 8 years old and you see something for the first time, it can open up a whole world. And that wouldn't happen without organizations like ours, and the ones that Liza's organization supports, to provide that kind of exposure.
Right.
You just don't know what kind of difference that will make along the way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no question that when you are interacting with these young people, and I'm sure David has experienced this, and all of our colleagues throughout the organizations, you literally see the light bulbs going off. That famous commercial with the light bulb goes on. You see it in their faces. You see it in their enthusiasm, and you see it in the questions that they ask after you've finished presenting whatever it is. And you see people come up to you, small people come up to you being more enthusiastic about everything just because they had that interaction with that art form that day.
Yeah.
And it helps people to understand there are other ways that I can express all these
That's
things that I'm feeling besides just, the written word or something else. That's why the NEA helps push the arts into prisons, push the arts into drug rehab programs, push the arts into homeless shelters, because these are our fellow human beings who have not found a way to express these important emotions that are just bubbling up that deserve to be spoken and released.
And for us, often it's a very direct kind of thing. We have a show up right now of Buford Delaney, a famous big-time artist
Yes.
that people around here don't know so much about, but he's from here, grew up here, always maintaining close connections here. And I've seen this happen on several occasions where a poor kid from East Knoxville realizes he's just like me.
Mm-hmm.
I can go out there in the world and really do something, and it's a kind of very direct inspiration that you can get,
Yeah.
and it's really exciting and gratifying to see that when it happens.
Another aspect, I think, of the value of what we do for the community, all of us, is when that student has a direct interaction with a professional who can explain life on their terms, who can explain by example how you need to be invested in yourself in order to be a successful person in the world. And doing it through the medium of art or music or whatever it is. This is sometimes much more powerful than someone just saying to you, this is what you got to do to be successful
And
in
you
life.
must practice hard and
do
so
this
forth.
or do your homework. It's different when a singer, I've seen this over and over and over again, when a singer sings something very impressive, and then there's the interaction between that student and the singer. Where'd you go to school? What did you have to sacrifice in order to become successful? You don't have to be a singer to understand the concept of investing in yourself. And that all happens because of programs that we all have that bring us into contact with the young people. It's not about everyone's going to become a ballet dancer tomorrow morning or a Buford Delaney. And it's also, to me, very important for the public at large, and including the people who will vote on such things as budgets, to understand that you don't need to like the art or like the ballet in order to support it, because it's what is needed in the community at large.
It may not speak to you,
Exactly.
but it may speak
It's
to a
important to
child
someone.
or to someone whose heart is broken, and help take them to a place where they can be happy and spread, productivity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I've seen several of the student performances that the opera company puts on, and it's amazing to watch the children there. And you see them moving about, and
You wouldn't think it, but
bobbing
they're so
heads.
engaged.
They're
They're
engaged.
living.
Yes, it's just fabulous.
They're engaged.
Yes.
And I think that's the key word, for these folks to be engaged. And I don't think it's limited to people who are in grade school. I think it's important for people of every age to be engaged and to lead rich, full lives. And if what we do enables them to do that, to be a part of a rich, full life, then I think we got our mission done.
And I think the important thing to keep in mind, whether you're a voter or you're in Congress, is that the little teeny tiny budget of the NEA, it's a rounding error. It's
Exactly.
half
We
a
call
hel-
it budget dust.
half a helicopter or something.
Budget dust.
Affects so many people in a positive way.
Yes.
And it's not this elite thing. It's not this fancy thing. It is so burrowed in at so many levels of our society, and it costs so little and it does so much good.
Well, that's one of the
Don't screw it up.
points that we were talking about, which is to nobody would appreciate the value of not spending that. Every member of every resident of the United States of America, the NEA cost them 46 cents. So no one would appreciate having that 46 cents back. But if it were gone, millions of people would suffer.
Oh, yes.
I can address too from experience that the process by which that money is given out, it's a very rigorous process. The last couple of summers I've been a panel reviewer for one very, very small area for art museums, and have spent many hours going through these long, thorough applications, and I can attest at how careful and thoughtful and how many steps have to be gone through. They're just not throwing out money. You have to work really hard to get.
It's not fluff or pork.
No,
some
no.
such.
Anything but.
No,
This is not a bridge to nowhere.
It is such a rigorous process.
Yeah, it is.
You work really hard for those dollars.
Right.
And you have to account for them. I mean, my gosh,
yeah,
the
the
reporting
bookkeeping,
alone. Because they take it very seriously. These are tax dollars. And the NEA itself as an institution is extremely serious about being thoughtful and careful about the expenditures of those funds. And in return, the organizations that have earned those funds are extremely careful to make
Yes, they
sure
will-
that those funds are spent in exactly the way that
They will
serves.
drive you crazy, but every penny is accounted for
Yeah.
and spent well.
Would it all organizations with federal funding would be that efficient and well run?
Well, what can I say? The arts are exceptional in many ways.
Yes, yes. Well, what would you do if this budget cut stays and they do in fact get rid of the NEA?
I think what David said was right. We're not going to not have education outreach programs. We're not going to stop doing performances here and there. Knoxville Opera Goes to Church is still going to happen. Fortunately, we have local sponsorship from businesses, foundations, from individuals. We have all of us have boards of directors who contribute generously. We're not going to stop serving our communities. It's just going to be a little harder to do so. And I think here's a key for me. I think the people who are generous with our organizations, they do so in a context of a general approval and appreciation by the public at large. The NEA is one key factor of the public at large. If the public at large is not expressing its support through the vehicle of the NEA, that's a critical thing psychologically, I believe.
It's like a good housekeeping seal of approval.
Thank you.
Sure.
And the NEA is one brick in a wall of many bricks that we all put together every year. I mean, we all have sort of complicated revenue streams, diverse revenue streams. We're really good at that. It isn't like we're just sitting there waiting for our check to come.
Well, because it's such a small percentage of your
Yes.
total
Yeah,
budgets.
but
I'm
it's an
sure.
important percentage. Plus, you can think about too, if you run a business that you can get up to 90% of your revenue. Getting that last few percentages that's the difference between being successful and eventually going out of business.
Yeah.
But in the short term, I don't think you'll notice any difference at all. But in the long term, I think it's going to be a corrosive and negative thing if the NEA were just to go away.
It's like they've said. I mean, it's not that all education activity would stop, but the reach wouldn't be as broad. The reach, and so who are we going to exclude? Are we going to exclude, the next, Kelsey Ballerini, who could, who grows up in the schools, learning music and then singing and, I mean, who's going to make that decision? I mean, who's going to be the child, or who's going to be the veteran, who's not going to be reached, and will have no way to overcome post-traumatic stress syndrome? Somebody is going to lose, and who is that deserving American that's going to lose? It's a frightening question. These organizations will go on, but their reach will not be as broad. And I think that that's really frightening. I think that there is something very great. You know, a great city like Knoxville, a great county like Knox County deserves great art, and a great country deserves great art.
Art is the signature of civilization. Period.
Yeah.
When you talk about any great civilization, you don't talk about its wars. You don't talk about its failures. You talk about its art, its architecture, its physical art, its music. That's how we know civilization evolved, is by these major signatures, not by the borderlines of where the country is. So we talk about the great artists, and we look constantly. We go to museums to go look at that great artwork, and we travel to a place like Egypt or Machu Picchu or wherever it is we travel to look at these amazing things that were left behind. That's what civilization is. It's the sum of its art.
And of course, you know, the $10,000 that supported the Children's Festival of Reading.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to meet the person who's going to argue against the Children's Festival of Reading. I mean, what? Our children don't deserve to be encouraged to read? I mean, you know, when my daughter was in 2nd grade, she wasn't really getting reading. And then I started reading to her Harry Potter. And I mean, the kid took the book out of my hand because I got tired, and she was like, I'm not finished with Harry. I mean, this, you know, it makes all the difference in all of our lives.
You know, there's a cliche: if it's not broken, don't try to fix it. This is not broken. We would, I think all of us would be much happier to have a discussion about how we're going to double the funding for the NEA, not how about to save what we have.
You know, I've done a lot of advocacy in Washington, and have always been really well received by representatives and our senators, by them and their
And
staff.
of all parties.
Of all parties, yeah. And I always hear, I was doing this for the American Alliance of Museums and talking about funding for the Institute for Museum and Library Services, another program that's slated to be cut. But they all had really positive stories about how they had been affected. This was completely outside of politics. And we said, well, you know, we're hoping to get the IMLS up to $30 million this year. And they just kind of laugh, like, you're joking. That's all. It is such a small amount of money.
Yeah.
And
It would help nobody to cut it, and it would hurt so many
That's right.
to lose it.
That's a little long for a bumper sticker, but it's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're eloquent spokesman for your projects and organizations, and we're so lucky to have so many organizations in town, and this number of 4,600 different events
And
programs.
activities,
Oh, my.
over 100 art and culture organizations, but Tennesseans love arts and culture. We have per capita more art and culture organizations than any other state in the Union.
Is that true?
Yeah, DC has more, but it's not a
Well.
state.
I used to live in D.C. That's a whole different subject. But yes, it is quite something to see, and really to open the newspaper, the weekly or the daily, whatever it is, and see the listings of opportunities here. It's really overwhelming.
people think that's normal, that Knoxville's a very special place, and there are so many opportunities in public schools and just out there in general. And that will, a little air will go out of that balloon if the NEA goes away.
Oh, sure.
It's not gonna be fatal, but it doesn't help.
Right. Do you have any closing thoughts?
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for having us.
Well, you know what? That's my line. Thank you so much for all the work you do. You really enrich our lives here. Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Good.